Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Two Matts and a Jeff podcast. We are back with season 2. I'm Matt Moyer, along with Matt Bannon and Jeff Moyer. And today's episode is all about the Philadelphia Eagles, and we're going to take a look at the best coaches of all time for the Philadelphia Eagles. So, Matt, you want to get us started with your, we're going to start with top 5. You want to give us your number 5 pick?
Sure. Good to be back, everybody. So my number 5 pick, I didn't even know was an Eagles coach until I started researching this, was a gentleman, I guess, named Greasy Neal, who coached the Birds from 1941 to 1950. Had a 590 winning percentage, which I thought was pretty good. 3-1 in the playoffs. I don't think they obviously didn't have nearly as many playoff games back then. And was the coach of the Birds NFL champs teams in 1948 and 1949. So that's my number 5.
All right. Well, my number 5 is a lot different. My number 5 is Buddy Ryan. He coached from 86 to 90. His record wasn't all that impressive when you look at it. 43 wins, 35 losses. And, you know, this is why I had him at 5, is he had no playoff wins. You know, he was always known for his defense, and so he had great defenses, but I mean, I don't know. I guess he didn't even have a coordinator or something for offense because they were terrible. You know, and but yeah. So that my number 5 is Buddy Ryan. Because like I said, he just he couldn't. I mean, I think a lot of the fans loved him and all that, and he was tough nosed and did all that. But
Buddy Ryan's definitely, I think, a fan favorite for guys who've been around Philly, and he's actually my number 5 also. I wanted to put him higher. I totally wanted to put him higher until I started looking at the numbers, and I just couldn't substantiate it, but I couldn't leave him off the list. But definitely, and I don't know, to be honest, what part he had in drafting and picking all those guys on the defense, but he had great defenses, and that's something to be said. But you're right, the zero never won a playoff game, and that definitely hurt him. But that's why I share my number 5 with you. But my heart wanted to put Buddy Ryan higher just because of the nostalgia of him. What do you got it for, man?
Well, ironically, I believe, if I recall correctly, my number 4 is Buddy Ryan. Coached the Birds from 86 to 90, 551 winner percentage. The 0-3 in the playoffs is huge. For me, one of the words I wrote down is just like you said, he was beloved, or is beloved to this day. He didn't win a playoff game, but I just think that his tone for his defense and his team matched the vibe of Philadelphia, which I think is why he's beloved, but also sort of why I thought, even though he didn't win a playoff game or whatever. I don't remember, you guys are a little younger than I am, but there was a fog game in Chicago that they may have won that or whatever, depending on that. And also, I wrote down for him, if you want to know a lot about, or I guess a kernel about Buddy Ryan, look up the hit on the Cowboys kicker, Zendejas. Google that. And see what he did. He basically sent out a hit on this kicker for the Cowboys. That tells you everything you need to know about Buddy Ryan.
I was going to say also he has he's got his legacy of his sons both coached and one's on ESPN right now.
But I think you made a really good point, Matt, which is that you don't get too much more Philadelphia than Buddy Ryan.
Right.
He matched the team, he matched the city, and I think that's a part of the reason why he was definitely beloved by people.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why I think we probably even have him on the list, to be truthful, because there are probably some older coaches that have a little bit better record, but we kind of include him because there's a nostalgia piece for us.
Yeah. Well, my number 4, I actually thought I was going to put him up higher, and I didn't. I did kind of what you mentioned with Buddy Ryan. My number 4 is Dick Vermeil. He coached from 76 to 1982, an NFC championship. He made it to the Super Bowl once and didn't win. His record is 54 wins, 47 losses, so 54% winning percentage. But again, a great coach from around here that, he still is on the radio. And of course, a lot of you out there, if you're not Eagles fans, maybe you saw Invincible and got to see Dick Vermeil being portrayed in the movie. So, but that was my number 4, Dick Vermeil.
Well, Dick Vermeil is definitely on my list, but he's a little higher for me. I actually have my 4 is the same as your 5, which is Earl Greasy Neal.
Earl, I didn't
and his first name is Earl. And you said a lot of things about him, but one thing you didn't say was the two years that he didn't kind of make some of the playoffs, I believe was Oh no, hold on, wrong guy. Sorry. He had 2 straight championships. He's in the Eagles Hall of Fame, Football Hall of
Yes.
Fame, 1969, and he was the 1948 Coach of the Year. So this is a guy that I had to frankly do some research on because he's way before my time. But I had to. I felt like I had to include him. So different guy I was thinking about for the other thing. But there you go. I had him as my number 4. So look up Earl Greasy Neal for two championships. Just was before the Super Bowl time.
Yeah.
So number 3.
Number 3. My number 3 is Dick Vermeil. Like you said, 76 to 82, the win percentage. I believe he is loved, sort of like Buddy Ryan, but not beloved. And he's not that status isn't there. But he goes around Philadelphia and people
Right.
still love him because he was the first coach to get the Birds to the Super Bowl. Lost the Raiders in Super Bowl 15. I guess in that year, the 79, 80, whatever season, he got multiple Coach of the Year awards, which I didn't know until I looked it up. And ironically, even though Buddy Ryan was known more for his D, apparently the Birds allowed the fewest points in the NFL that season at 222, which I was surprised. I knew that team had a good defense, but I didn't realize that they were that good at D. I thought they were more Will Montgomery, Jaws, whatever.
Right.
And a turnaround coach, really, because
Oh.
turned the team around from what was a bad team.
As in Invincible,
Yeah.
if you've seen Invincible,
And apparently he has his own wine stuff now.
I saw
Oh,
that.
really?
Yes, I heard it on the
Oh,
radio.
that's been somebody
Yes.
somebody saying that. Yes.
and did end up coaching a Super Bowl champ with
yes.
the Rams.
The Rams. Yes.
St. Louis.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I guess our lists are different because my number 3 is our current coach, Doug Peterson.
Ooh.
I put him there because he won a Super Bowl. No one else could say that he won a Super Bowl for the Eagles. And as we were making our list, we started making these lists a little earlier. And so maybe currently it's not as great as a spot to put him in, but I think because he won us the Super Bowl and he had a good record coming into the season, that's why I'm at 3. So
Well, I kind of wanted to include him, but I'll be honest with everyone right now, he's not on the list. Now, when you look at the numbers, and I think if we had done these lists right after the Super Bowl, then he might have appeared on the list. But even with doing this list quite a while back before the demise of the current team, he didn't make my list. But number 3, I have Buck Shaw. 36 wins, 19 losses, NFL champs in 1960, AP Coach of the Year in 1960, NFL Coach of the Year in 1960. He was 40 years of coaching. And he is, I believe, one of the only people, maybe the only people, to beat the Packers with Lombardi for the title. So that I thought was an accomplishment.
Significant.
Significant. So so Buck Shaw, he was only with the team for a couple of years. So it wasn't a lot of years of longevity. So
I was
that's
going to say I put him as an honorable mention.
Me too. I have his honorable
Because he's
mention.
only here for like a couple of years. So.
yeah, and that definitely played a part of it. I guess the title in '60 and beating Lombardi and those kinds of things kind of stood out for me with him, and so that's why I put Buck Shaw in there. Again, a guy before my time as well.
My time too. All right, so my number 2 is Doug Peterson, and the only reason that he is at 2 or even on my list is because of the Super Bowl. Now, I did notice, and I did change my stats. As of before tonight's game, he has a 536 winning percentage. Going into this season, I didn't write it down, but I remember it was in the 600s. So obviously, it hasn't been here. It's 6 from 16 to now. That gutsy Philly special call. I mean, that takes some, to make that in the Super Bowl. I put down that he significantly misses Frank Reich as his offensive coordinator. I mean, I really think that's
and
a
DiFilippo apparently.
as a quarterback
Quarterback,
coach.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I mean, he's a completely different guy or whatever. I don't know. I'm reserving sort of my judgment, as far as end game till later. But the way I listed it is he probably, even though he's screwing up now, he probably doesn't have to buy a beer in Philadelphia for the rest of his life.
No.
Well, that's true. I think
Because of that
I
title.
think it'll be interesting where he's at in 5 years from now, 6 years from now. Or, how do we look back on Doug Peterson? Part of his body of work. He has the Super Bowl championship, which is great,
Right.
but he hasn't been here very long either.
Right.
And kind of. I think it's part of what left him off the list for me. And probably most people will be kicking me our only Super Bowl title for keeping the coach off, but maybe not after this season.
Well, I was just going to say the other thing is, listening to our sports talk is that when hearing from the national people is that, let's say the Eagles were going to let him go this year at the end of the season, he'd get a job, and instant. So that's why I also was thinking that, it's one of those things,
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, everyone has a bad season here and there. That happens to probably every coach and great coaches too. It's interesting to see what he's going to do with some different players and some different pieces, and if he can get some more say in some of those players, like it sounds like maybe he wants. I love the gutsy calls. Occasionally they're foolish.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like there's a line there, and he crosses over to it sometimes of like foolish gutsy call. Who knows? If the Philly special didn't work out, we might have been calling that the stupidest play in Super Bowl history or something. So,
Yeah.
Who do you got?
Well, my number 2 is probably your guy's number 1, Andy Reid, and so he's been here. He was there from '99 to 2012, so a long time. 5 NFC championships, of course, 1 Super Bowl loss, and who knows if Patriots didn't cheat. At his record was 130 and 93 and 1, so a 583%. And he was 2002 Coach of the Year. Like I said, you probably have him number 1 at this point. But
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it probably comes down to 2 coaches that are left that you think would be on my list. So my number 2 is not Andy Reid; it's Dick Vermeil. Now, a part of this for me, I think, as most of my lists are guys that have some, connection for my life. So it's hard to put guys in or put guys ahead of guys that I actually watch coach and watching. But so Dick Vermeil, he was a little over 500, winning percentage, you guys already said. 1979 Coach of the Year, 1978 UPI NFC Coach of the Year. The Super Bowl, you said, 3 and 4 in the playoffs. I think some gutsy moves, turning the team around. That whole move that, I know it's a movie, but the reality of the Vince Papale move, doing that open tryout and stuff like that, what an incredibly gutsy thing to do. You think about,
first-year person.
Yeah, first-year person and coming to the pros and doing that kind of gutsy move, and it paid off in a guy that is beloved in the city, and he was a good, solid player, not a great player, but taking the team to the Super Bowl. I think overall, and again, his body of work outside of the team is pretty darn good too. But he's a guy that's quintessential kind of Philadelphia, and a guy that we always kind of look at, again, you said on the radio, but nationally too. Yeah. He's a guy that certainly is well respected all over the place. So he's my number 2. So who do you got for number 1, Matt?
That's right. Is it Andy? Yeah, it is. No, it's not Andy. Yes, it is Andy Reid. So I have Andy Reid at number 1. You guys said all the stats or whatever, 10 and 9 in the playoffs. The biggest thing is for me with Andy Reid is, just the longevity. 4 consecutive NFC Championship games, but only 1 Super Bowl. That's sort of a little bit of a downer. But to get to 4 in a row is a big thing. Let's see. I wrote down lost Super Bowl 39 to the cheating Patriots as well. Patriot fans out there, I'm sure you don't care for that, but it's the truth. They knew what we were going to run. Multiple Coach of the Years. I think of Andy Reid, I think of offensive innovation, a great screen game, which the Patriots knew about. Bad clock management is one thing, as a negative that I wrote down. Too many wasted timeouts early in the game. And what's the last thing I wrote down here? When the Eagles ended up firing him, it was just because I think that the team needed a new voice. Yep. They had lost. They weren't hearing him anymore. Because you look at where he's been now. Patrick Mahomes has had a lot to do with what he's been there.
But even before.
But when he had Alex Smith, the Chiefs were still very, very good. So, so that's.
Well, I was going to say, one of my one downside too was him is that he was a little stubborn. With the pass, if he wanted to do, he kind of abandoned the run.
Right.
Right. If anyone nationally is listening to this show, and I doubt they are, but if they are, they would probably have a hard time thinking about the real negatives of Andy Reid. But in Philadelphia, we know them very well because we do a great job in Philadelphia picking out what great people do not well. And everybody has their faults. So we're really good at that. And definitely he didn't run the ball enough, no doubt. Yeah. So who's your number 1?
Well, it's funny because when I started looking at it, again, I don't know this guy either, and it was your bottom guy,
Yeah, my
which is
five.
so interesting that he's my top guy. And I think mainly because, he won, I guess, and that is Earl Greasy Neal. He was here again for 9 years. He won 2 championships. Obviously it was before the Super Bowl, but it is what that is. And his record was 63-43. He had a .594 winning percentage. Yes, he's in the Eagles Hall of Fame, but also the Pro Hall of Fame. So again, that's why I was looking at that as saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to just notch him above Andy Reid. I don't know a lot else about the guy, but going by numbers and things and being a Hall of Famer. Andy Reid probably will get to the Hall of Fame. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not
I mean-
especially now that he's
Right.
Greasy, as I guess we can call him now, since we know him, we can call him the nickname. 9 seasons with
Yeah,
the
that's what I
Eagles,
said,
so
yeah.
that's legitimate.
Yeah.
I went with Andy Reid. The longevity, I think, is the thing, and a long body of work of winning. Yes, they only got to the Super Bowl once and they lost, but they had the NFC, the 5 NFC Championship games, 130 wins, most in the history of the Eagles. I don't think we truly appreciated how good he was. I did. I really, and I mean that. Like, he was a guy that when they're bashing him on the radio, I said at the time, even though I think it was time for him to go, when it was time to go, that he is the best coach in the history of the franchise. I said it then, and I believe it now. Doug Peterson's going to have to do a lot to surpass him, in my opinion. He's going to have to put in a lot of years here and do more than just, more than just one Super Bowl win to get there. It's just unheard of. You think about it in the NFL. How many guys stay with a team as long as he stayed with the Eagles and had that kind of success, and then he's went on obviously to have a lot of success. I don't think we truly appreciate him. So that 2002 Coach of the Year, Pro Football Coach of the Year 2000, 2002. The 4 consecutive division titles, and we said all the numbers. So to me, it's going to be hard and a long time before I think someone can pass Andy Reid as the best coach. And I would put I have him better than Greasy, because I think the numbers substantiate it. But certainly Hall of Fame for him, and I think Andy Reid will make the Hall of Fame, trip over himself getting in the Hall of Fame when he decides he doesn't want to coach anymore. I think that'll probably be what happens when he decides he doesn't want to coach anymore, because I don't think he's going anywhere for a while. So
he may get another ring this year.
Right.
he may very well get one. That's right.
The other thing I was going to say about him is I think about, I think he had stuff to do with drafting McNabb,
Yes, I
right?
think
But
so.
like, again, I don't know if it was his fault or whose, but like why he didn't get the wide receivers to go with him until we got T.O.
Yeah.
And coaches can take some of that blame or some of that credit for players, but how much, it's hard to tell, right? It's hard to tell who's calling all the shots in the room.
When we look back at that, he drafted McNabb over, I believe, Ricky Williams.
Yes, he did.
And at the time, people bashed him.
Oh, he
for
got
that.
booed.
And
Yeah.
think about all
Booed.
the other quarterbacks that McNabb was, got outlasted all those other
Right.
quarterbacks that came out in that draft. So yeah, and he came out of Syracuse,
Right.
so they did the job, and
Yeah.
Yep.
so.
Well, there you have it, gang. Our list of the top coaches in Eagles history. We thank you all for watching or listening, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at 2 Matts and a Jeff. We'll see you next time.